Hi, this is Louis Lord Nelson, host of UDL in 15 Minutes. In the post-production of this episode, there were some technical difficulties, so you will hear some occasional over-talking, and I apologize for that. What my guest had to share, though, was too important to edit out. Remember that I post a transcript and a video montage with closed captioning for every episode of UDL in 15 Minutes at www.theudlapproach.com/media. And now, enjoy. Podcast host Louis Lord Nelson.
Hello and welcome to UDL in 15 Minutes, where educators discuss their experiences with UDL. I'm Louis Lord Nelson, UDL author and leader. Today I'm talking with Dan Schmidt, who teaches at Pretty Boy Elementary in Baltimore County Public Schools in Baltimore, Maryland. Today, Dan is going to share how the phrase, "why not?" shifted his instruction in a way that it now encourages the growth of expert learners. Hi, Dan. How are you?
I'm really well, Louis. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you very much. And thanks for coming on to the podcast.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Dan Schmidt posing with his class of 22 math students.
Well, will you please share with us your teaching background to get us started?
The homepage for Pretty Boy Elementary School.
Sure. I've been teaching 26 years, and the first 2 years were in Baltimore County. I was lucky enough after that year to get a job teaching in Switzerland for a year, where I taught first and second grades. Then I went back to Baltimore County and ended up at Pretty Boy, where I taught first grade for 4 to 5 years, third grade for several years, fourth grade for a few years, and now I'm in my second year of teaching fifth grade.
So you've been all over elementary and to teach in Switzerland for a year.
hmm
That's really
It was
cool.
great.
All right. And you're also in a state that UDL is in the educational policy, but how has that impacted what you've learned about UDL and how you've been supported on that journey, and who has helped support that implementation?
The front of Pretty Boy Elementary School.
Well, actually, I will say that the implementation, well, not the implementation, but the thought or the idea for it started a long time ago. And I'll get to that in a minute. But what really gave me the green light to go ahead with some of the UDL type ideas that I was thinking was a course that I took at Pretty Boy, led by my principal, Nikki Norris, and the stat teacher, Kathy Calbaugh. Taking the course was really sort of a revelation and a green light to go ahead and implement some UDL type of ideas that I had in place or have been thinking about for a while.
Nikki Norris, the principal of Pretty Boy Elementary School.
Okay. And can you help people understand what a stat teacher is?
They are a person who goes around the school. They don't have a classroom, but they support us with, for example, our stat teacher handles advanced placement of students. She is a technology person. Any sort of issues
Okay.
that we have technology wise, she will address it. Or if we have a need or have an idea, she'll help us to implement it.
Kathy Kelbaugh, the stat teacher.
Okay. So really an all-round
Yes,
talent,
she
we'd
really is
say.
very talented too.
Oh, that's wonderful. And that's and then she helps with people understanding universal design for learning there at Pretty
Right,
Boy.
right.
Fabulous. All right, well, let's just jump into your story, because that whole point of you heard the phrase "why not," and you heard it in such a way that made you kind of have your own
hmm
little aha moment. So share
Well,
that.
actually, the first why not was my mother in a completely different context, but it got me thinking. That's kind of a good question to ask yourself because a lot of times adults will, if we're asked a question, and I asked my students about this yesterday, do parents say no right away to you when you ask a question? They're like, yeah. I said, well, I sort of retrained myself into thinking rather than saying no, that knee jerk reaction, why not? So, what really happened with me is after teaching first grade for a while, they moved me, as I said, to third grade. And I think part of the thinking was that as a first grade teacher, you can really break things down for students. And I had enough practice with that. So, when I went to third grade, I was often given students who struggled to learn. So, as a result of that, a lot of times they would have me work with a resource teacher who went around to the school and was picking up best practices, and the instructional assistants were doing the same thing. And there was this one particularly talented teacher who would come into my math class, And she would implement or use all these strategies. And I would stand back and watch her and I think, wow, if this is working for students who are struggling, why not try it with the students who may not be struggling, but you never really know because they're not going to freely admit it. So why not let everybody have access to these strategies? And so at that point, really the why not became my mantra for new ideas. I try to use it as sort of a growth mindset, even student suggestions, why not try it? And so that's really where that why not sort of developed.
Dan providing instruction to the class while gesturing to the digital whiteboard.
It just opens this huge door of permissions, not just for you, but for your learners. And I'm sure it affects your entire environment. It just changes that
I
mindset.
appreciate that. In fact, I have a couple girls who are coming to my class to decorate the door because I thought, I'm a math teacher. Why does my classroom door not reflect that? So they, well, they'll ask me, they come during lunch and they'll ask me if they can do something. And I'm like, sure, why not? So give it a try. In fact, there's a poster sitting on the table in in the back of my room which hasn't been put up. And I'm looking at it this morning thinking, I wonder what that's going to turn out to look like. But I'm going to let them give it a try. And really, it's their classroom. I want them to make it look the way they think it should look.
The door to Dan's classroom. Above it are the words, Math Rocks. On the door is a hand drawing of Dan playing the drums and a smaller poster of a math problem worked out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you're willing to
Sure.
take a picture of that,
The phrase is going to be
right?
math rocks. So, and they know that I play the drums, not very well, but I do play the drums. So
Oh,
it, it
I
it's
love
fun.
that. That is. You had also shared a story about a student who had been reluctant at the beginning of the year and how this kind of why not touched
Yeah.
into that
And
experience
this
working with
really
that
was
student.
sort of an extension of the UDL course, really making sure that all students have access to the curriculum. And there was a girl in my class last year. Last year was the first year I taught fifth grade. So I had her the year before because I moved from fourth to fifth grade, and I knew she was a student who struggled. And so I made it my goal to get her to raise her hand every day, not by calling on her and surprising her, just to set up the situation so she felt confident enough to raise her hand. Um, and I always start the year, and I did it last year and almost every year with I kind of outlaw and discourage students, and I know they want to express how confident they are about something, but they'll shout out, "Oh, I get it," or "That's easy," or something like that. And I always ask the question, and this is of students who are struggling all the way up to the advanced students who are working a grade level or two ahead of fifth grade, to raise their hand if they've ever been in a situation where they're sitting next to someone who says, "Oh, I get it," or that person next to them's hand shoots up in the air, and they think to themselves, "Ooh, I don't get it." And I share with them that I was that student.
Hmm.
I would sit there and think, and sometimes I'd raise my hand just to make it look like I got it, but I really didn't. And it's really surprising because every hand in the room,
Right.
except for maybe a few, go up and say, "Yeah, I've been in that situation." So a lot of times, I will preface a question with, "Don't raise your hand. Don't say I've got it. Don't say express in any way whether you get it or don't get it. What I want you to do is just think about the problem that's on the board, or think about the question or your response to the question." And sometimes I'll just be quiet for a while.
Dan and a student standing to the left of the digital whiteboard discussing the problems on the board while other students sit on the floor listening and watching.
Almost an awkward moment, but I want them to really have time to think. And then I'll say, don't raise your hand now. Turn and tell someone in the room sitting next to you, closely, preferably, what you think the answer is or how you would explain this. And then I give them time. And usually, when the talking starts to diminish, that's my clue that it's time to move on. Um, and that allows that student, and this particular student that I was talking about last year, giving her time to really think it through. And when she turned and talked to her partner, did her answer reflect what the other person was thinking? Did the other person have a completely different thought? And it really gives them reflection time. And then I'll say, okay, raise your hand if you think you know the answer. And it was really neat because in the very beginning of the year, her hand was very, very slowly go up. But toward the middle of the year, it was going up with everybody else's. And I would call on her, and it was really rewarding. But I think that, and I do that with the advanced students as well, because they admitted, they're that student who doesn't get it sometimes.
Dan Schmidt posing with his class of 22 math students.
And so what I'm really trying to do is give everybody that full access to the curriculum. And to me, that full access is really what UDL is all about.
Absolutely. And that example, just right in there, you've touched on in big, big ways, at least three of the guidelines. So, recruiting interest, so helping minimize those threats and distractions. So, not only thinking about that one student, but helping the other students recognize and realize, you know what, I've been in this position
Mm-hmm.
too, which automatically was hooking in self regulation in that sense of the self-assessment and that reflection. And then this act of bringing in the think time and the wait time, helping the students build in those executive functioning skills where they're really thinking about their strategizing. What do I want to say instead of, oh, I've got the answer? It just shows this fabulous, beautiful, tight connection between those three.
The UDL framework graphic.
I'm seeing it happen this year too with students who I didn't know as well this year because I didn't move up from fourth to fifth. But I did see in the beginning that they were having a hard time. And I think they're becoming more comfortable. And the first class I have of the day, and I only teach math, I think that's kind of important to mention. But the first class of the day are my struggling students. But, and I've said to them many times, in fact, recently, I'm starting to think, boy, I really wish I could teach you guys all day long because they are such eager learners now. And I can't take full credit for that. I know that they have some wonderful teachers that they see throughout the day, but I just really love watching them thrive. And I'm going to miss them next year. That is for sure.
A student writing on the digital whiteboard while other students are sitting on the floor watching. Dan Schmidt is sitting to the side.
Oh, that's wonderful. And so, what you've also just talked about is the fact that you recognize they're eager learners, you recognize that there's other things that are impacting them, and that they exist within this entire environment of Pretty
It
Boy.
really is.
And that's in UDL is a big deal at Pretty Boy. And so you all have been encouraged and supported to learn about that framework and to think about how it works within not
Hmm.
just your lessons, but again, the
Yeah,
environment.
yeah.
It's just such a
Great
huge
environment to
and
work in.
beautiful impact. Wonderful to see. So is most of the training right now, it just kind of occurs naturally?
A student standing next to her poster showing how to add fractions with unlike denominators.
They're not always about UDL. And we also, in fact, today, Wednesday, I am meeting with my grade level. And so we have opportunities to see where it fits maybe specifically with fifth grade. But when there are general professional development meetings, it is talked about. And one of the things that I really like about Nikki's style is she will mention, and I guess teachers do this too. You could point to a student who's doing what you really want the rest of the class to do. And so she will bring up things that she's seeing around the school and mention them, and in a way, subtly encouraging people to adopt or consider a UDL type activity.
Pretty Boy Elementary Principal Nikki Norris.
And so she gets around to the classrooms a lot.
Well, and again, it's a wonderful example of great leadership and how she, as a leader,
Hmm.
is helping to move forward the framework.
Dan Schmidt sitting at his drum set, holding his drumsticks above his head.
Well, we've reached our
All
15
right,
minutes,
that was fast.
and I really appreciate this. Thank you so, so very much.
screen capture video demonstrating how to navigate to the podcast on the udlapproach.com website, followed by a picture of podcast host Louis Lord Nelson.
For those of you who are listening to this podcast, you can find supplemental materials like an image montage with closed captioning, that montage audio descriptions, a transcript, and an associated blog at my website, theudlapproach.com/media. And finally, if you have a story to share about UDL implementation for UDL in 15 minutes, you can contact me through the udlapproach.com. And thanks to everyone for your work in revolutionizing education through UDL and making it our goal to develop expert learners.